Welcome to Symphoria Presents Meet the Musician. My name is Kelly Covert and I play flute and piccolo with Symphoria, and I will be your host as we sit down and get to know each of our Symphoria musicians. On this episode, I'm sitting down with Jessica King, second bassoonist and contrabassoonist of Symphoria. Let's hear all about Jessica's musical journey. Welcome, Jessica King, to the Meet the Musician podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Hi, Kelly. I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. So, as our listeners know about you already, you play second bassoon and contrabassoon with us in Symphoria. And, you know, bassoon is such an unusual instrument. I would love to know, and I'm sure everyone else would too, how you found the bassoon.
Maybe the bassoon found me.
Maybe,
no.
Yeah.
I actually started off playing clarinet. I had a very normal introduction to music in school. So in fifth grade, we were allowed to choose band instruments. And the choice was between flute, clarinet, saxophone, percussion, and trumpet. There were just the young band instruments. Mm-hmm. I started on clarinet, and our middle school band didn't have any kind of bass section. I think there might have been one trombone player, but there wasn't any tuba or anything like that. And I actually ended up playing bass clarinet in band because I just liked the way it sounded. And then when I got a little older and moved on to high school, as bass clarinetist, I was sitting right next to a bassoonist. And I just thought that was the coolest sound. It was, wow, what is that? It sounds like the forest has come alive. I need to make that sound. And of course, my band director was so happy because not many people, really reach out and say, hey, band director, I want to play the bassoon. So he put one of those in my hands right away. And we talked my parents into lessons, and here I am.
Fantastic. I love that. I just love that it drew you in by the way that it sounded.
Yeah, nothing in the world sounds like a bassoon.
It's so true. It's so true. So now that you are an expert, a master at playing bassoon, what is it that you love now?
I love it when people tell me I'm a master of playing the bassoon.
Of course you are.
That might be what I love. No. What do I love about it now? Well, I love being the bass of the orchestra. Especially when I play contrabassoon, I really have an opportunity to support all the players around me. You don't notice it, most likely, unless you specifically listen for it. But if the bass instrument, the basses, the tuba, the contrabassoon, if they aren't there, it creates kind of an emptier sound. It's not quite as full of a sound. And if it's not done well, then it's like the orchestra has no foundation to play off of. We all should be listening down to tune our instruments. And so I feel very proud to be the person people are listening to make sure that they're in tune and to be the foundation for the whole thing mm-hmm. when I have a chance to do that. The contrabassoon plays what I think are some of the most beautiful whole notes in the orchestral repertoire, and I just love it. The bassoon, wow, I mean, you have so many opportunities. You can sing like a tenor. You can sing like a baritone. You can be goofy like a clown, or you can be just absolutely heartbreaking and poignant. It's an instrument that has it can just display a huge range of emotions and really has a variety of voices to draw on. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to do that.
I love that. I love how you describe it in so many different ways. And I think it's so fascinating to think about, especially like you said, when you're playing contrabassoon and you're playing these beautiful whole notes that create the foundation for the rest of the orchestra. I think so often as we're listening to music, we focus on the melody and we focus on those high instruments that, are sort of flashy and let themselves be heard. And we don't always appreciate the instruments that make it possible. It's such a wonderful highlight. I just encourage everyone as they're listening, the next time they come to a concert, especially when you're playing contrabassoon, and you guys will notice because it's ginormous, to see if you can hear it, see if you can listen for that deep foundation. That's so fantastic. So, Jessica, tell us a little bit about where you are from. How did you land in Syracuse?
Oh, I think I might have to tell you some family history. I don't know if that's okay. No, I will. It's okay. I am from a small town in Virginia. At least that's where I say I'm from. My family is very young, and we moved around a lot when I was a kid. And part of the reason I play bassoon, actually, is because I moved from this very small town where I was playing clarinet and bass clarinet to actually Columbia, Maryland, which is a planned community. It is like the most suburban place you can imagine in your life. It's a suburb of DC and a suburb of Baltimore. They put tons of money into their schools. So the schools actually owned bassoons. Like many, many schools do not own bassoons, or the ones that they do are in terrible, terrible shape. So I had the privilege of playing on a brand new Fox instrument, it was the student version of the instrument I actually ended up buying and still perform on. It was a great instrument, and it really gave me a lot of opportunity going to school there.
From Columbia, where did you do your musical studies?
Well, I did my bachelor's degree and my master's degree at West Virginia University. It's a solid music school. It's close to Pittsburgh, so we got to hear the Pittsburgh Symphony, and some of my teachers played in like the Pittsburgh Ballet. Didn't really spend any money on that. They wanted to have me there, so they spent some money on me. And then I decided to make an investment and get my doctorate at Eastman. So right over in Rochester, Eastman is considered a very strong conservatory, one of the best in the country. So I have a doctorate from Eastman. I studied with John Hunt, and I was there. It took me about 7 years to finish that degree.
And then you started playing here with Symphoria in what year?
Gosh, I think 2013 was my first full-time year. Well, I started substituting before we were Symphoria. So I came in to play the parts that Dave Ross used to play after he retired. Dave Ross is the former second bassoon and contrabassoonist. Wonderful guy. He still comes to the concerts.
Well, we are so happy to have you here with us, being the foundation, being the solid base for all of us to play on top of. And I think it's always interesting, I think, for non-musicians particularly, and even maybe people who were, in high school band or whatever, to think about what it means to play second bassoon or second anything. And I know my 12-year-old son who plays in band always says, well, is the first chair better than the second chair? It's so fascinating to me to explain to him what it means to play second. So how does that feel to you? What does it mean to you to play second?
That's a hard question. Playing second often means making the first sound amazing.
Yes.
And sometimes it takes a lot of skill to do that. Now, I'm not saying that the first doesn't sound amazing on their own. When they're playing solo, it's all them. But when you're playing together, you have to focus a lot on balance and intonation. So it means that if I am just a little bit high or a little bit low, if I were playing by myself, it might not matter so much. You might not notice it. But if I play just a little bit off, nobody's going to look at me and say, "Whoo, she sounds bad." They're going to look at the principal and say, "Why is that principal so out of tune?" So it's my job to make her sound good. Uh-huh. I think about that a lot. And then balance is also tricky. So there are some rules that I follow that until you get to this point, most people wouldn't know about. If I'm playing in unison with the principal, I will try to play at about half the volume. That way, she's still shining. I'm just there supporting her. But if I'm playing an octave below her, I'll actually play a little bit louder than her if we're playing in octaves together. that gives her a nice base to go off of and lets her sing over top and be expressive and feel kind of safe to do those things. And then there are other special rules of intonation. There are certain intervals that actually need to be played a little bit more open or a little bit more closed. So I might have to play a little bit lower if she's playing a minor third above me. I want to open that up a little bit.
I find it endlessly fascinating to think about how, number one, important each part is in an orchestra, and number two, how those players approach their parts in different and necessarily different ways. And so like I really appreciate your sharing that with us, because I think that that's something that many people wonder about and don't often know the answer to. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it.
When you are not playing with Symphoria and practicing, which I'm sure you do a lot of as well, what are the things that you love to do around Syracuse and in other places as well?
I'm a little bit of a hermit. I like to garden, which is hard in Syracuse for about half the year. So I have a lot of houseplants. They're my friends. I like to garden and I like to read. I like to read science fiction and I like to read nonfiction in particular. So I guess in public, you'll find me at the library or Barnes & Noble a fair amount. I do like to go out to eat a little bit too much, and there are a couple great restaurants in Syracuse.
What are some of your favorites?
Oh, I think a Pizzeria Gennaro.
Oh, I love that too. This is not an ad. We don't get paid to say this.
But if they wanted to sponsor us, we would take it.
That's exactly right. What are the things that you're planning on having in your garden this summer?
Well, here I'm kind of stuck with a porch garden, so it's a little bit tight, but I'll plant a few tomatoes. I actually like to plant sweet potatoes. I don't get a lot of sweet potatoes out of my plantings because they don't get full sun, but they do have a lot of really beautiful foliage, and I'll get one or two small ones out of a pot. I'll plant some flowers and some herbs. Yeah.
That sounds lovely. I feel like that's a porch that I would like to come visit sometime.
You're welcome to.
Well, thank you. I might take you up on that. So in thinking about moving forward with Symphoria, as a Symphoria musician, what do you think is some of the most important words that we can say to the people who come to our concerts?
We're here. We're not going anywhere. And we would really love to have your support.
Jessica, thank you so much. Thank you for all that you do with Symphoria. Thank you for being our strong foundation.
Thank you, Kelly.